the team has to be willing to be vulnerable and self-aware and acknowledge the mistakes, right? If that point of acknowledgement does not happen, then they're not acknowledging the mistake, the misstep, the failure, the fall down. They're essentially trying to cover it up. And that does nothing for culture. That does nothing for the team because they're not learning anything.
Hey, I'm Chris Steer, and you're listening to the Art and Science of Leadership podcast. So welcome, the show where we break down what it really takes to lead with care, clarity, and connection. This podcast is built around what we can learn from neuroscience, organizational data, lived experience, and timeless wisdom when it comes to the art and science of leadership, so that you can not only grow and learn, but also bring your teams and your organizations to a higher level. We're all about permanent beta, always learning and never done growing. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Art and Science of Leadership podcast. I am joined once again by my leadership partner in crime, Amy Larkin, and we're very excited about our topic today. And Amy came up with this very pithy, on point slogan for today, and it's from fumble to focus, the resilient mindset. And once again, as you can see from the tenor and tone of our podcast episodes, sports and athletics become such a wonderful feeder into the world of leadership and business and people management. And so we'll be toggling back and forth, as we often do, between the world of athletics and the world of organizational leadership. But make no mistake, our aim and objective is to provide you with interesting tools, relevant practices, mindset change that can help you become a better leader and manager within your organization and help you drive performance. So Amy, let's get after it.
Excited. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And it's so interesting, my friend, because one of the things that you and I have talked about in our own personal journeys is you hit this time in your professional growth where you realize that you can actually reframe the idea of what it means to fail.
Sure. Absolutely. And if you think about it, Chris, we have been very well versed and grown up in the world of sport. But building a business is very much like training for a championship, right?
Totally right.
And, being able to have a mindset and shift on focusing on the lessons that you can learn through failures, and that becoming a platform for you in how you get better, smarter, and move on to the next attempt to try something, I think is where that reframing of the brain comes, that we need to be talking about and discussing today in terms of business. But athletes do it all the time.
Yes.
You take a shot, you miss, you have to get over it very quickly. Like the game is in play. Things move at lightning speed, and you don't have time to dwell on, the shots that you've missed. You need to keep trying and attempting to break through that line of defense, to make that next play, for your team.
Yeah. Well said. And it's interesting because what we see often is that lesson, those kinds of that resilient mindset is not pulled through into the organizational context, strangely enough, right? Because what you have is in organizations, like in an athletic team, it is a human dynamic. People produce performance, period. So if you are an organizational leader, how do you want to present and show up for your team when you're experiencing these setbacks or these failures in the product launch or failures in hitting your financial numbers? How do you want to frame that? Do you want to frame that as a learning opportunity so that we can get better and pull the learning through? Or do you want to be a hammer and have everybody sort of shrink back in fear or lack the confidence to move forward? Or even worse, lack the confidence to make mistakes? Because often we see the greatest yield, the jump, when we are taking risk and learning and wondering if this project's going to work at all. So that is a great parallel. And we see this all the time.
And in reflecting, getting ready for this podcast, I did some thinking, and almost all of my failures in my career and frankly in life, all of my missteps, my fumbles were my greatest lessons, quite frankly. Not necessarily the wins. The wins were incredible to celebrate, but I learned the most through failing. And back in the early days of my career at Under Armour, a former boss of mine and still a great friend of mine, Steve Batista, he used to give out an award at the end of every year for the marketing team called the Greatest Failure Award. And it was like the coveted prize, that each team or each individual really wanted to have that award. And the purpose of that award, that he created was to acknowledge the effort, right? To acknowledge the attempt that, not every product, not every campaign relative to the business that we were in, the industry, worked. But the effort put in to take a stab at it and an attempt was what he wanted to be promoting. That, without trying, how do we ever know if it's going to work or not? And I think as leaders, the best thing you can do for your team is to be vulnerable and to be very open about the failures that you've experienced and that you've had, and acknowledge them, own them, be accountable to them, and teach your team how to recover, right? Yes. It is about how fast can you recover, and get back on track and get back to focusing. And, if you look around the world, we would not be where we are today in medical advancement, technology. We would not be able to be in two different places today, Chris, Zooming on a podcast, without many people trying and failing time and time and time again.
Right on. And we know that, let's just take it back to the 4 pillars of our body of knowledge within Steer, right, Amy? We often talk about these lessons, this empirical data that we're sharing right now, that the story that you shared from your Under Armour days is exactly spot on, that an organization is willing to celebrate that, right? What does that do? That instills confidence, right? And when people play with confidence, they perform better. That is true in the organizational context as well as on the athletic context. But we also know one of our 4 pillars is neuroscience and modern psychology. And what we know about modern psychology that has really helped us, and I'm referencing Dr. Carly Hunt from our team, is the fact that when we see the setback as opportunity, we have that choice. That is our choice, right? The event, the circumstance, it's neutral. It's our response that makes the difference. So if I can choose to see this as learning and growth, I can rewire my neural pathways and then therefore propel myself forward. That's not easy, but that's where the growth and the learning comes from. As you said, your greatest learnings came from failure, right?
That's right.
And the same thing is true in my entrepreneurial career, my legal career, my consulting career. All of my greatest leaps have come from a place of a gap, a loss, a failure, a misstep.
That's right.
And I haven't always been the best at being able to respond. But as you continue to learn and grow and surround yourself with great people and take those lessons forward, that resilience, that bounce back, as you refer to it, comes into play.
Correct. And, I think this day and age, it does become more and more difficult, right? When you have a team in business or you have a team in sport, you don't necessarily know where each individual came from and how they were raised. One great example that I love, that I've listened to this story time and time again, is from Sarah Blakely, the CEO and founder of Spanx. And she tells a story of her childhood where every week her father would sit her and her brother down and say, what did you fail at this week? and they had to come to the table with an answer.
Yes.
And you talk about reframing the brain. That was what he was attempting to do, was to get them to try, and to look at failure as a positive thing, not a negative thing. And she attributes a lot of those early lessons in childhood and the way she thought about failure for her success today.
No question.
And I think that's something that we should be constantly thinking of, as leaders, as parents, not to put these protective or necessarily toxic bubbles around teams of people, but to stand beside your team, to stand beside your kids and allow them to feel growth pains and figure out how to climb back up themselves. And that's hard, as parents, but also as coaches and as leaders. It's very hard to watch your team struggle and to overcome that adversity. But that's what makes them stronger.
No
and I think, being able to take that pause as a leader and give them the support and that extra push and confidence they need might just lead to some of the greatest innovations and discoveries within your business.
No question. And the phrase that comes to mind as you're describing that to me, Amy, is that next play mentality.
Right?
Right?
That's right.
Whatever happened, did I score? Did I miss? Did I turn it over? It doesn't matter. It's the next play, right? Yeah. It's about being able to manage emotion, being able to manage expectation, being able to manage your next right move. And that's ancient wisdom as much as it is modern neuroscience. We've learned this across all timeless wisdom traditions, that why would you labor through unnecessarily dwelling on that? What's the learning? Move forward. You and I talked off camera about the great Nelson Mandela. We think this attribution is correct to Nelson Mandela, which is, I never lose. I only win or I learn. And when we see this in the organizational context, and some of Adam Grant's research is spot on in this area, but we see this where those organizations that are willing to risk failure, they're willing to risk perceived setbacks. But so long as you have the right team in place, the clarity of the strategy and the process, then you are always going to be well served in creating an environment, a team culture where failure is learning. Mistakes are learning. Next play. Look, we have our own collegiate athletic experiences, Amy, but now we have, guess what? Our kids are playing Division I sports now too. And how often do we talk about next play? All the time. And the earlier in your life that you can adopt the next play mentality, the more you're not likely to carry around all this unnecessary emotional baggage. We talk about emotional labor being so exhausting. So next play, right? Next play.
I think the quote is from Wayne Gretzky. You miss 100% of the shots you never take.
Right on.
And a few years ago, when my daughter was a bit younger, that was one of the things that her coach worked the most with her on was, getting over the missed goal or what have you. Move on, keep going, next play. That mentality is so important in business. So relatable. Training through failure. And again, the correlation between, business and building a business, and also the process of training for a major, sports event are so similar in that. And I think leaders, one of the most important components is the team has to be willing to be vulnerable and self-aware and acknowledge the mistakes, right? If that point of acknowledgement does not happen, then they're not acknowledging the mistake, the misstep, the failure, the fall down. They're essentially trying to cover it up. And that does nothing for culture. That does nothing for the team because they're not learning anything. Right. They're just kind of swiping it to the side, putting a Band-Aid over top of it. And I think the more exposed leaders and teams can be to those failures, it is about breaking down, the game, watching film, if you will.
Yeah.
What are we learning from the things we didn't do right this past week or on this particular project?
Right.
And how can we advance those failures to make the next best product, to develop the next great software,
That's right.
to build the next great innovative, car model. I mean, it could be relative across every single industry.
No question. And you raise a very important point. By no stretch of the imagination are we saying that performance is up for grabs. No, we're suggesting, in fact, we're doing more than suggesting, because all of the research and data and experiential is a mandate. You will perform better if you're adopting this failure forward mindset, right? The fumble, the focus, resiliency. It will drive performance, because the last thing that you want as a leader is your team playing safe or playing scared, right? And I mean that 100% in the organizational context. And we have clients right now who they're on a continuum of how well they do this. And the ones that are sustainably growing are the ones that are not afraid to have those failure conversations, because it is in fact propelling them forward.
Well, and let's talk about resiliency right now for a second. That's how you build resiliency, right? Yeah. And, you become tougher mentally, and you're able to handle greater failures and life challenges.
Yeah.
The more you're able to learn how to get back up, right? And I have seen this more in my personal life, frankly, than on the business side. I've come into, this very interesting time in my life where, my mom was sick, for many, many years growing up, and I had to grow up very quickly, right? So, I was in high school and handling very, very adult type of things. I had a natural pathway to built-in resiliency because of that situation in my personal life, right? I think it has a lot to do with who I am today. So I've always had this fear in my life of, oh gosh, well, how do you build in resiliency to, kids when you're not, when you're blessed enough to not have these big crossroads in your life. Yeah. And again, it's like you have to let them own, their mistakes. You have to let them fail. And I've seen that on my teams as well through business is, you at times come into these moments where you realize people are scared to fail for a couple of reasons. Number one, they've been reprimanded too many times. And so the fear is for having their hands slapped or losing their job. And the other is that they have not failed before.
Correct.
And that is such a disadvantage to whether you're raising a family or you're building a team, to drive that type of perfection, right? Perfection is the enemy. And there's a reason for that, especially when it comes to resiliency. Yeah. You have to not put a protective bubble around your team and around people that you are grooming to be, the next great leaders out there.
Right. Don't stunt their growth. If you're going to develop, you can't scale yourself. So as you're developing other people, build in that layer of confidence. There's some very interesting work out there and research being done by some folks like Dr. Michael Gervais, which works with a lot of athletes, professional sports teams, organizational leadership around confidence and around failing forward. And so we would recommend, listening to some Dr. Michael Gervais work. I think there's some other podcasts that you and I listen to that are also very helpful to learn about this. I know Rich Roll tackles some of these issues. Some of the research and work from Carol Dweck is very helpful in this realm as well. Of course, Adam Grant from the organizational psychology perspective is wildly helpful. But so, Amy, when we think about some of the real actionable items coming out of today, right? And I heard you say a few things, right? Number one, embrace the failure, embrace the setbacks as learning moments, right? So
right.
let's be aware of them and then choose how you step into them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shift the focus, take it away from failure and into growth, right? Which is the next play mentality, right? And then surround yourself with the right support system to ensure that that it reinforces resilience. It reinforces taking good risk. It reinforces confidence, right?
That's right.
And would you say that's a fair summation of the key points for today?
Absolutely. I think it is, it's about recovery. It's about getting back up.
Yeah.
Get knocked down 7 times,
Yeah.
Get back up for number 8. And it might be 8 that works, or it might be 800.
Right.
You just never know, but it is about learning to recover quickly
Yeah.
and moving forward. And at the root of everything we do, Chris, it's about learning. It's
It's
about
about
growth.
learning. Permanent beta, buddy.
That's
Permanent
right.
beta all the time, always learning, always growing, always turning into a better version of yourselves, which then cascades to your teams and to your organizations. And I think the real call to action for everybody is spend some time critically thinking about some of the fumbles, right, Amy? And
Yes.
and thinking about how did you respond? How can you respond better?
That's
Don't let
right.
it be a cloud. Let it be fuel for you to grow and improve. And I think that's what
Absolutely.
we
And
really
share
want to
that.
improve. Yeah. Yeah.
Share that. Share that with your team. Share that with, your mentees, the next generation coming up that maybe asks you out for coffee. Really
Mm-hmm.
talk about how important failure is,
Mm-hmm.
for you as a leader,
Yeah.
and be open
Yeah.
with and exposed, if you will, with
Yeah.
the things that are not fun to talk about all the time, but I
Mm-hmm.
think are so helpful and additive
Yeah.
for the next up and coming leadership teams
Yeah.
to really realize that it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to fail.
Yeah.
It's okay to get knocked down.
Yeah.
It's in the rise back up. It's in the
Yeah.
comeback that the story is.
Well said. Life is bigger, richer, fuller, better when we are embracing the risk, the challenge, the failure, because that pushes us forward to growth. Amy, this has been awesome. We could talk about this for hours. We probably will continue to talk about this for
That's
hours.
right. That's right.
And so we thank everybody for engaging with us today. And please follow our podcast on YouTube, subscribe to our podcast on YouTube. And as we put up on social media some of the clips from this podcast, engage with us. Let us know what you think. Put some of your personal examples on there, some of your fumbles and how you learn from your fumbles so you gain more focus and resiliency. So we are excited to engage with our broader leadership and management community here. So permanent beta friends, we will see you next time.